My grandfather was a Christian pastor in Germany. He always said he was born on the wrong side of the ocean at the wrong time of history. He was drafted into the German army along with every able-bodied person right as the Second World War began in 1939, and immediately placed on a frontline unit, Unit 699, that was placed in the heart of Russia and moving through Ukraine and into Russia in the southern flank. They were heading for the city of Baku, for their goal was to basically capture the oil reserves of the Russian armies and the Russian government. And being on a bridge-building unit right at the front lines, often behind enemy lines, there were huge amounts of casualties and a lot of heartache. One day, his commanding officer towards the end of the war called him into his office, his makeshift office, and asked him a very direct question. He said, "Herr Hasel, do you believe that Germany is going to win this war?" And the question was kind of a catch-22, because if you're a patriotic soldier, you're going to say, of course we're going to win this war. But also being a Bible student and as pastor and having studied prophecy, my grandfather knew that Germany would not win the war, and so he was conflicted and he didn't know exactly what to say, and at that moment he said a silent prayer to heaven. And then he said, "Is this an official or an unofficial question?" And they had kind of an unwritten code within their unit that when they had their hats off, they could speak on an unofficial capacity. And so the commanding officer stopped for a moment, and then he said, "Okay, it's unofficial." And he took off his hat and placed it on his desk, and my grandfather did the same. And he pulled out a Bible from his pocket, opened it up to Daniel chapter 2, and began to tell the story of Nebuchadnezzar's dream. And he said, "I don't believe that Hitler is correct. His empire cannot last 1,000 years as he's promising the German people. This war has to fail because of biblical prophecy and how everything has been fulfilled in the past."
Nearly 2,500 years ago, King Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, had a dream. Now, it's been said that this dream revealed the history of Earth from that time until today. Now, is this actually true? In order to find out, we need to go back to the book of Daniel.
Daniel was taken captive about 605 BC. According to the book, he was taken captive right about the beginning of the reign of King Nebuchadnezzar II, who established the resurgence of Babylon as a very strong power in the ancient Near East. He took a number of princes from the city of Jerusalem captive, one of whom was Daniel.
Well, it was not unusual that conquerors, kings who conquered the land, would take from royal families and nobility young people and take them with them to their own country. And it was mainly done for two reasons. One reason is that these young people will be educated in Babylon, and they would accept not only language of Babylonians, but they would accept culture and religion and everything from Babylon.
They would take the cream of the crop, the intelligentsia, the royalty. They would take the artisans, the writers, the physicians, so that their land was developed at a high level, but they would leave some of the people in the land and allow a local person to rule. That's exactly what happened with the time of Daniel. Daniel and his friends were taken from Jerusalem to Babylonia.
We find Daniel captive in Babylon. Now, Daniel chapter 1 tells us why he's there. Okay? Nebuchadnezzar had gone to Jerusalem in 3 separate raids.
The first one was in 605 BC. Then there was another one around 598 BC and another one around 586 BC. Each time the penalty against the people of Jerusalem was a little bit more severe. It may have been in that initial attack in 605 when Daniel and his friends, princes of the kingdom, were taken into captivity with the idea of training them and making them sympathetic supporters of the Babylonian crown.
This piece chronicles events from 605 to 594 BC, including Nebuchadnezzar's campaign into Palestine and the first capture of Jerusalem.
Daniel was probably brought back to Babylon on the first raid by Nebuchadnezzar. He comes to Babylon, and he is enrolled in the schools of the Babylonians. He's given a Babylonian name, he's fed Babylonian food. He is enrolled in their schools in a kind of Babylonian brainwashing. to prepare him to assimilate to Babylonian culture and language, and eventually to be a kind of puppet ruler over the Jews for the Babylonian Empire.
He risked his life by insisting on remaining pure in the way that he ate, in his diet, and so on, and what he drank, rather than just accepting the hospitality of the king. Now that was extraordinarily dangerous. And if you don't accept the hospitality, that is a serious insult. Now you see, that can be dangerous even if you're equals with somebody. But Daniel was not the equal with Nebuchadnezzar. He was a captive. He was being treated with a massive blessing and compliment from the king, the great king who had conquered all these other kingdoms, and yet he refused his hospitality. This was very dangerous, but God blessed him. He got through that, and he became much wiser than all of the other wise men.
One of the most fascinating stories in the Bible is the story of Nebuchadnezzar in Daniel chapter 2. Nebuchadnezzar has dreams, the Bible says. It was his second year of his reign, and he wakes up completely disturbed because he's had this amazing dream, and like something that happens to so many of us, he wakes up and he doesn't remember what he dreamed.
He dreamt a dream that terrified the daylights out of him. Now, this has got to be quite a dream to terrify this kind of a king. He knows it's from the gods. He's just conquered all this territory, but it still frightens him. He doesn't know what it means. Obviously, to him, as many other people in the Near East thought, as well as Pharaoh in the book of Genesis, he thought this had something to do with him and his future and his kingdom, but he didn't know what. And what's more, in the morning he had that impression, but he forgot what the details of the dream were, so he couldn't even remember it.
It's fascinating. When you look at archaeological evidence, tablets that have been dug up from 6th century Babylon, we find that dreams were a common part of Babylonian existence, particularly among the priestly class, among the elite class. There was a whole school of how to deal with dreams. They had books on how to interpret and define dreams. So that description of the king having a dream and having someone come in to interpret it fits right in with the 6th century context.